Welcome to the podcast, Neen and Mike. Thanks for joining me on the show today. How are you and where are you?
We are currently in Lincoln in the middle of the UK. And we're also very, very hot as we're having a heat wave. And we decided this weekend was the weekend we were going to get together and have a ride. And I don't know, are you regretting that yet, Mike?
I haven't. Not quite. I'm hopeful for many a beer later on, to be honest. But, you know, if this bit goes nicely, then we can earn it, you know?
Yeah, that's the one.
So there's maybe one piece of information that you haven't shared yet, which is there anything peculiar about how we're recording this interview today?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So Mike and I are currently recording whilst we're riding together. And I'm not sure whether that's ever been done before, to be honest. What do you think, Simon?
Well, I'm very intrigued about this question because I think we may need to consult the Guinness Book of World Records, because I certainly have never heard a podcast where the host is sitting in his lavish and I might add quite cool podcasting studio while his guests are actually out there doing the hard yards, riding their motorcycles. So it's got to be a world record, surely.
I hope so. It'd be really nice to be the first people to ever have done it.
Absolutely. So, okay, let me get to my first question, which is, who came up with the idea to ride and film separately but be in this sort of constant voice communication the way you are at the moment?
Mike, do you want to go with that one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's kind of an evolution of things. We started off doing bike rides, you know, two up. It was my bike, I was riding it, Neen was on the back. And we got, you know, what seemed like a wonderful intercom at the time, which later turned out it wasn't, but that's the lack of experience for you. Yeah, we started off doing that, and then Neen got her own bike, and we got better comms, and we'd do the occasional trip together. But even whilst living at the other end of the country, you'd get a, do you want to go out for a ride now? Like, well, we live 2 miles apart, so that clearly isn't going to be, let's meet in the middle of the country. And quite often it would just be a phone call, which was fun. And then the actual filming things came later on. I think it was the first filming we did on Borderloop, or have we attempted it somewhere else before?
No, so we went to Ireland a few years back, and I dusted off an old GoPro 4, which is going way back now. I think that's like a 10-year-old camera. And I put it on a test mount, and we went around Ireland and filmed some of those bits of it. And I think that was just like in that effort to, you know, I mean, every motorbike rider will take loads of photos of their bike, but there's another layer when you're recording yourself actually riding it. And I think personally I wanted to have a bit of that myself. And it is wonderful to kind of look back and see all of that footage. But then, you know, one of what was missing was us talking to each other. Like, you couldn't hear that. So, and that just feels like such an integral part of our experience, and I think maybe other riders' experience as well. Because when you go for a group ride, being able to share that experience with people around you is so important. And so I think it kind of came together quite organically, from like us always talking whilst we were riding anyway, and then introducing sort of the camera elements, and then realizing, oh no, we still need that audio element to it.
So when you first conceived of the idea to ride and film and chat at the same time, what did you imagine that you would be talking about as you rode along?
Yeah, so the first time we actually did that was on a trip we nicknamed Border Loop, where we crossed over to France and then went round all of the borders, basically crossing from France to Belgium to Luxembourg, Germany, and back again. And we figured out a way for us to record our comms. So we did our first sort of audio recording then, and it was way more of a sort of an interview style thing. Like Mike basically interviewed me, so it sounded a lot like a podcast. And we were talking about kind of what we wanted Ride More to be in a way, but also the sort of shared experiences of riding motorbikes. And we were, quite pleased with ourselves. We put it up on the internet, and the internet told us nobody cared. But yeah, obviously we were not deterred. But it gave us time to think about, well, okay, what do we want to talk about together? And I think whenever we do a challenge, we kind of try and have a few things that we want to talk about at the front of our mind. Whether that's, riding in the cold or riding late at night and visibility, or, like this, riding in the heat and how best to kind of look after yourself there. So we want to talk about the riding experience, I think, because that's like a relatable thing that everybody can enjoy.
I have to bring you back for a moment. So you said that you rode around France, or should we say Western Europe, and you recorded your conversation, and it sounded like a podcast, but you didn't release it as a podcast. I'm just saying you probably missed an opportunity for a world record there that I'm now going to grab.
Oh, man. Or maybe we'll go back and try again.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an excuse to go away again, isn't it, Mike?
So you mentioned just briefly also this idea of challenges. So can you just explain, maybe Mike, for listeners, how and why you came up with having these monthly challenges for each of your rides?
The challenges are an excuse. That's probably the best way to think of them. I think for a lot of people, they get involved in a thing and they have a direction, and learning to ride a bike is a journey. You do your CBT or equivalent, and then move on to doing the direct access stuff, and you have this kind of path, and then at the end of it there is what do I do now? Because I don't have anyone telling me what to do, and it's not the same for everyone. Obviously some people are very intrinsically motivated to get out there by themselves, but I think sometimes you just need a purpose to make something a little bit either more interesting, a little bit more challenging, or to be able to share it with someone else. And I did a fair amount of sports psychology education, so I was trying to think of ways that we can get groups to be more related and people enjoy themselves as part of a group rather than having to find motivation to do it themselves. So yeah, it kind of starts in there. And then also it's good fun if people get to share what they've done with us, and we can have a conversation about that, and that happens occasionally.
Yeah, we kind of talked about it early on, as as Mike says, it is an excuse to kind of get out on your bike, but it's also not always easy to get out on your bike. There is sometimes it's just easier, more convenient to get in your car, or do that sort of thing, but instead of putting on all of your gear and your helmet and getting the bike out, and sometimes that can feel like a bit of effort. But we that can feel like a little bit of effort, but you never regret having gone out for a ride. Like, it's always worth it. And sometimes I think riding a bike can be so good for you and your mental health. And it is similar to exercise in that, you never regret doing a workout, and you never regret going out for a ride. You always come back feeling a bit better, even if it's not gone particularly well, or you find that your skills are a bit rusty or whatever, I bet you'll still feel better for it.
We've done trips where we've been blown all over the place and absolutely soaked. There is a fantastic story from Ireland where Neen did a lead to turn left and the wind just said no. She basically went straight forward. But that to most people will have been absolutely horrific weather. But in terms of something that we look back on, it's a fantastic experience. Like completely ridiculous, but fantastic.
Do you think that experience would not have been half as, I hesitate to use the word enjoyable, but maybe let's just say use enjoyable as a placeholder for the moment. Would it not have been as enjoyable if you were by yourself, if you weren't in constant communication with someone sharing that moment?
Oh, I think that's different for different people. I think that you can go out, you can challenge yourself, you can push yourself outside of your comfort zone and enjoy that. I've always thought that there's two ways of experiencing something. There's the experience that you get and the enjoyment that you get from doing the thing, and then there's the experience and enjoyment that you get from sharing the thing with somebody else. And whether that's actually in doing it or in showing the pictures or the footage or whatever afterwards. So I suppose I always think that even if you're doing it by yourself, you'll always enjoy it. And if you film it and show it to somebody else later, you'll enjoy it again in a different way. For us, I think that being able to kind of talk and point out things that we're seeing, and that does make it more enjoyable. It adds our friendship into the mix, and I think then getting to share it online means that we get to invite the community engaged with that as well. So I think there's a lot of different layers to
it. And what sort of things do you typically talk about now? I mean, it's maybe not quite the original concept, but if you were describing to someone who's never seen any of your videos on YouTube, how would you describe those videos?
There's obviously our core concept of riding together miles apart. Two motorbike, riders going out and for a ride in different parts of the country and experiencing kind of the same experience, but on a different road or in a different place, And I think that is one way to look at it. The other way is probably to just think of it as like you're kind of watching your friends go for a ride and, just kind of chat all sorts of nonsense to each other. And, that's quite enjoyable. And I hope that when people do watch sorts of our videos and we're just waffling on all kinds of nonsense, that they kind of enjoy it and they feel like, oh, that's what it's like when I go riding with my friends. That's the experience that I get when, we're laughing and joking over things. And so as much as we do like to talk about motorbike topics, I think just talking about day-to-day stuff as well is quite important.
Well, I think you can very quickly go from having what is a predominantly motorbike conversation, and then you just get a human element of us essentially talking about, you'll see something that's funny and then it'll spark a conversation about something that has absolutely nothing to do with motorbike. But it fits in because it's the journey that we're on. It's the thing that we're doing at the time together. So motorbike is just the sort of the way of doing it, if you like.
Okay. So I was just going to say before we got interrupted, I was going to say, what you're describing almost sounds like a what I would call a buddy podcast, the kind of podcast that ostensibly there's some sort of topic maybe that brings you into the podcast, but actually it's really just a excuse for a couple of friends to sit down, almost like if they were in a pub, and the audience almost feels like they're sitting around the table at the pub with you, listening, but not actually interacting otherwise. But
Yeah, that's it. I mean, all this sort of terminology is new to us because we haven't really ventured into the world of podcasts. Well, as you just heard, we we tried a little bit whilst we were trying to figure out our format.
well, potentially I'm giving you all sorts of ideas here, though. Yeah.
Yeah, you are.
I would say that the having to work just in audio rather than video is it's a little bit easier from a post-production point of view, shall we say. But can you please talk us through how you achieve all of this? Like, what's your technical solution? And how has that technical solution changed over time, if it had to? Did you have to do a lot of experimentation in the beginning? That's obviously very interesting to me. I'm a bit of a geek, and I'd like to know how you do this.
Oh, I think you're going to be very disappointed.
Yeah. Also, the term solution is just so way off because all we've had is difficulties. Well, I think I would point out a couple of things at the beginning of what we're about to say is the fact that we were starting from a place where we were trying to do things with existing things that we had, and not necessarily trying to spend too much on finding a solution because, and that's a whole different thing that we could probably get into about the fact that, riding motorbikes is not cheap, and accessibility there is definitely a challenge. But so we started with our GoPros that were 10 years old, and we already had the helmets that we've got, and they've got center intercoms in them. So we were working from that as a base, and so thought, well, Pardo can talk to one another and record. So surely ours can do that, and it turns out
Surely Senna would be able to do the same thing.
Yeah.
No.
So we reached out to Senna and we said, like, this is what we want to do. And is there a way to do it? And they didn't know themselves. So we figured out that actually you can record a three-way sort of conversation with three headsets and record that if one of the headsets is, I think, like a Senna 50S or something, was it, Mike?
Yeah, something like that with a output or input jack, output jack, one of the jacks.
Yeah, so we got one of those comms and we put a inline recorder into it, and so when we were together, like on border loop, we could record ourselves. So that was sort of a solution there for part of it. But the other thing that came up is obviously that we ride together miles apart. So that didn't help us in the long run. So we, obviously we didn't want to spend changing our comm system and our helmets and everything. So we've been trying to kind of figure out a way to do it. So we then found out that iPhone was developing the ability to record phone calls in the UK, because previously we weren't able to do that. So we basically waited and prayed for them to do that. And it was only in this last year that they have. So that is the primary way that we are now recording our phone calls. But those phone calls, like the audio on them, are not great. So then we've tried to sort of upgrade our cameras. So Mike got a new GoPro, I got the Insta360, and then we're trying to figure out how to put audio onto those. So Mike now has sort of a bigger media mode on his. I've got the DJI Mic 2 Bluetooth mic for the X4. But still, like, the noise inside of a helmet when you're doing any sort of speed, it does audio that is often clipped or, distorted in some way. I could probably fill in an entire podcast by myself just ranting about how difficult
Yeah, we've had some. I mean, the editing bit is where obviously all this comes out, because you don't really see it beforehand. I mean, I had this idea of if we just took out the need to record the combined call, and we just had an audio feed to Neen's 360 and an audio feed to my GoPro, and I could put those two things together in sort of the editing phase. But then that kind of didn't work for some of it. Neen's audio was not great, or it wouldn't sync up with mine, or there'd be some other issue. So we always had the phone call as the backup. But then the downside of that is you've got now a video feed with its own audio, which covers also the sort of the environment that you're in, your bike noise, and everyone loves a bike noise, and then my voice, and then I'm trying to add it to a phone call that already has my voice on it. So it's an effort of trying to line them up to the millisecond, which is, fine at one end of the video, and then by the time you get halfway through it, you're a second out and have no idea how, because sound and time is both just maths, and that should work, but it doesn't. And then you're having to quiet down clips, or you think you've got it, and then you watch it back, and then you have an echo, so you're having to go back into editing. That was a bit of a disaster. And even down to the editing bit, there was a point, I used Final Cut Pro to put the video together with, two feeds from the 360, two feeds from my two GoPros, and then an audio feed on top of that. And I was putting those things together, and I'll just point out that I'm by no means an expert. It's pop up with a file size for like 300 gig, and my Mac can just go, nope, well, can't do anything, sorry. And then you kind of stuck going, well, I don't really know why that's happened, or what's going on with that. And then, you spend a week getting cross at it and figure out how to deal with the video you've got in front of you, and putting 3 smaller videos together to make one long one, and then after that go and research your forums that go, oh yeah, optimization takes 10 times more space than is actually required.
Yeah, it's been a learning curve.
It certainly sounds like it. But now, to make one of your videos, how long does it take to create the finished product? Like, have you found that your workflow's become more efficient, or are you still struggling a bit?
Oh, it's definitely more efficient. The first one we did, there was the 3C,
which was
the better part of 2 weeks.
That was ambitious as well. Like, as it was, for perspective, like it was, 1 day, 3 cities, constant footage, and it was our first one. So it was a massive amount of footage.
I think we fell into the trap of just assuming that everything worked the way it was supposed to, and that was some of the enormous files that I was messing with. And then obviously, because we're at other ends of the country, actually that kicking out a file is one thing, but then you have to upload it to a server or cloud, so Neen could have the footage to then chop up into other things. But that was the first one. That was 2 weeks of pretty much solid work on that video. I think the last one was probably down to 2 days.
Yeah.
Until 2 days of putting it together and lining everything up and getting the angles all sorted out, and making sure that the voices were in the right places, messing about with different sounds on the odd clip and all of that. And then kicking it out, and then we tend to come together and have a watch through and get a load of notes together and make those changes, and then you get the YouTube version. And then they spent, I don't know how long you spent on it, quite a bit of time, chopping it into chunks.
Yeah. I would say that editing it for Instagram is the same again, if not more, because like I say, if not more, it's a considerable amount of time editing a clip for Instagram, and then not only just like the footage itself, but then, you want to put in your subtitles and your caption, and you're thinking about the copy, and then you're, trying to get Instagram to do it. And there's been times when I've like scheduled loads of clips, and then for some reason Instagram just knocks them out, and I have to go back through and do it all over again. And that is quite a painstaking part of the process. And
also, Instagram doesn't let you be in two places at once. So if they schedule something at her end, I can't see what that is until it comes out. So it's not like I can even be really particularly helpful there. No, that one hasn't posted, but no problem. I know where that clip is. I'll just chuck it on now.
Yeah.
It's just something was supposed to happen and it didn't.
Yeah, so there's been teething issues there too.
Are you when you're creating things on Instagram, are you like creating them on a phone or a tablet, or are you doing them on another program like Final Cut Pro first of all, and then just uploading them to Instagram?
So I was originally doing it in Instagram, editing it itself, because that was something that we both would have access to, and in terms of like looking for like consistency in what we were posting, because that's apparently what Instagram likes, and good for like branding and recognition and that sort of stuff. But because Instagram, was messing up and not posting things, decided to move and use CapCut. So at least now, like sort of, we'll chop it up into clips, and then I'll go into CapCut and I'll sort of massage those clips a little bit more to make them, even faster, similar to what I imagine you would do, Simon, as a podcast producer. You have so little time on Instagram to grab people's attention, and they're so impatient that the natural flow of a conversation that might take that little bit longer, they swipe away before you've even managed to talk about what you want to talk about. So, I try and clip it down so like there's very little pausing. It's very like everything happens a little bit quicker, and then save that down with all of the captions and headings and everything, so that even if it does go wrong, we've got the finished file there, and we don't have to start it all over again from scratch.
Like that. We have a tractor. Looks like he's taking his head off. Obviously doing some hedge trimming there, but is currently underneath the trimmer bit, taking up half the road, and a car coming on at the same time.
Yeah, it's one of those things about like you can be on a road and you don't come across anybody, and then at the worst possible place, another car is coming. It's the same with corners as well. Like you're like, I've not seen a car for ages, and then as you're going around a bend, there will be a car.
Always a beautiful bend. Well,
yeah.
I'll do this right on the line. Oh no, I'll move it because I'm going to be hit by a bus.
Yeah, I don't know what that is, but there must be a universal thing.
There'll be some law, that's applicable here. That your law of the universe that determines this.
I imagine.
As someone who likes to ride in silence, which that's me, and that's something I really enjoy, riding in silence, or should we say, without the distractions of music or conversation. Can you explain what the pros and cons of being in constant communication while you're riding with another rider? What are those?
I don't necessarily. I personally haven't particularly found a huge disadvantage to it. I understand it can be a bit of distraction. Found a dog. There's distractions to be had. Apparently, I'm very chatty. I heard earlier today.
He is very chatty.
But while you're dealing with something else on the road, like for instance, a tractor coming your way, could be a bit of a distraction. But for the most part, I haven't really found a huge disadvantage. And perhaps you can attest to my being distracted.
I absolutely can, yeah. So I mean, I think this is like an interesting thing in sort of riding anyway, because, you know, when you're first learning, it's hard for your brain to remember how to do everything. And as you become more and more experienced, your body and your brain just has muscle memory, and you just know what you're doing without even thinking. But I remember first starting to ride, and Mike and I would be talking, and you'll still probably hear it in our videos now. Like, there will be a long pause, because I'll be looking around the road, or I'll be trying to look at the sat nav to figure out where I'm going, or, you know, just concentrating on, you know, a bend or something, where, you know, your brain just goes, I cannot communicate at the same time as trying to, like, nail this piece of riding. And, you know, I put up a post the other day just saying the same sort of thing of, like, you know, we've had a few times when we've been filming and we've had to say, should we redo that because we couldn't do it concisely, and it's like, well, yeah, of course, there's always time to re-record something, but, like, you know, you should always prioritize your riding. But when we first started talking, when I learned and got my license, I did find it really difficult sometimes to pay attention to what Mike was saying and ride at the same time. And now it's a lot easier because I've got a lot more experience, but I think sometimes you do need that little bit of silence so you can concentrate on what you're doing. And I remember when I did first learn to ride, one of the things I did in my own helmet was that I talked to myself to kind of say, remember to do these things, you know, remember to look for this, you know, kind of narrated what I was doing, which is a really, really helpful technique as a new rider, because it really drills into you the way that you should be riding. But no, I think being in constant communication is definitely fun. There are times, and I think we've been on a few long trips together, and we always say there's like a 5 o'clock silence between us because we just won't talk for ages. And it always seems to be at that time of the day when we're just a bit done. And then eventually we get a second wind.
Yeah, there is advantage side though, particularly when we're in person, is we do watch out for each other quite well. You know, we've been on autobahn sort of speeds before, and very mindful of the stuff coming up behind you. And actually, for me, probably also around the other rider. So, Neen, like I'll be saying, you should probably watch that car. It's been a bit of an arse. I mean, there was the guy in northern France that I've clocked in the mirror. I mean, there is a video of it on Instagram if anyone wants to go check that out. But there was a guy that I could see from ahead that he was just all over Neen's back wheel, and I'm pretty protected, really. So I was like, no. I mean, you should be aware that guy is all over you. And then same guy decided that, well, I'm going to go past these two bikes that are obviously not going fast enough. And he came flying down the side of us. Should have probably tried to split the two of us up and pull back in and the sight of the oncoming lorry, but instead decided to floor it, and then the process sprayed me with dirt from the road, and it was all very close, and there was some swearing.
Yeah,
but you know,
really close, didn't it?
Yeah, it was. The camera didn't do it justice at all, but the being in communication in that respect is really helpful. Just, you know, stay alive a little bit longer.
Certainly, and I have seen that clip myself, and I would encourage anyone who's interested in the topic just to go and watch that, because it's certainly captured, and you'll understand exactly what Mike means if you see that clip. In one of your YouTube videos, which is called Night Ride MotoQuest Book Drop at UK Landmarks, very concise.
Keywords are important.
Mike, I guess you're going for the algorithm optimization there. Mike, you said it doesn't need to be an epic. I've come 30 minutes away from my house and it was dark and that was completely different to if I'd done it in the day. You then go on to explain how riding is a much
Sorry, Simon. We're
it's
just
sort
going
of
past a load of trikes that are just coming past us.
a load of
Probably
what?
Like 5 trikes.
Trikes, motor trikes.
Yeah.
They look crazy.
We'll show you that on the footage. That was quite something.
Okay.
We'll send you that one. You'll it's probably something that's perhaps lost when you can't actually see it at the
That
time.
was very surprising.
No, that's okay. So you go on to explain how riding is a more rich experience than driving in a car because you feel less isolated from the outside world around you in terms of what you hear, what you smell, etc. But actually, I wanted to ask you about the nature of adventure because I think you were sort of hinting at that when you talked about the fact that, you'd only come away for 30 minutes from your house and you were still having an adventure. Is this concept of adventure, is this something that you think about a lot? And, what is your personal definition of adventure?
Well, I think when it comes to adventure, there's the bigger adventures that the ones you kind of dream of. But actually, to do something that's just not your normal day is, it becomes something of an adventure, and particularly when it's not necessarily planned. And Neen and I are particularly terrible at planning, or we deliberately don't plan for the adventure. So for me, that's all it really needs to be. I'm going to go and do a thing. I'm going to do it up there somewhere, and I'll just see what happens when we get up there. It doesn't need to be huge, just different to normal, something I wouldn't normally do. That's a light level sort of adventure. I think if you add some element of challenge to it, then your adventure gets a little bit more interesting. Like we talk about border loop, and perhaps people that have done similar sort of trips will understand, and people that have never really done anything like that definitely won't. But it's a long way, to go from
6 countries in 7 days. No, 6 countries in 6 days. 7 countries in 6 days.
something like that.
Yeah, it was.
It's not far off 2,000 miles. We didn't plan a lot of it. I think we'd literally planned to stay in one place, and then after that it was just on the day we can go stay there, which is probably how we ended up in some of the countries that we did.
Yeah, there was no route, no plan. We just sort of went with it.
But that is a bit unknown. That it was, physically challenging because it's a long way. And obviously, when you're riding in a different country and the laws are slightly different and the roads are slightly different, and what is it? We look left, turn right.
Yeah.
You're saying that all the way around, so I'd go the right way around the roundabout. Things like that. It's tiring. So I think it's easy to create a adventure by doing something different. If you want to make your adventure a little bit bigger, go a little bit further. If you want to make it a bit more interesting, make it a bit harder. There's so many different ways to create adventure. And as I so concisely put earlier on, it does not need to be an epic. It just needs to be something.
Yeah, and I think for me it's about getting out of your comfort zone, and that you can do in the smallest of ways every single day. And I think part of being on a bike and learning how to be a better rider is about pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. It's about taking that bend, and it's about trying to nail a line that you maybe didn't get before, or go slightly faster, or drive slightly smoother, or whatever. But I think adventure is about getting out of your comfort zone, and that, you can do that 30 minutes from your house. You can try something that you've never tried before, and there's loads of people that are coming to motorcycling now, at a later age. And I always think when I see anybody taking on getting their bike license, like that is getting out of your comfort zone. Like that is a real adventure. Getting your bike license is a real adventure because there is nothing quite like this, and you've got plenty of people telling you how dangerous it is. And so I think that, adventure, it goes hand in hand with motorbikes.
For sure. Just one thing that you touched on there was this concept of, I guess I would call it formally, continuous education. And I think that's one of the appeals, at least for me, of motorcycling, which is that you're constantly working at your skill and your craft, and you will improve over time. But it's, at least I feel that I'll never get to a stage where I'm not learning or acquiring experience, which is beneficial for my riding. I mean, you're a relatively new rider, I assume, Neen, and correct me if I'm wrong, but has that been very much your experience as well, that you really are very mindful of the fact that you're constantly learning almost every time you go out riding?
Sorry, Simon, I'm losing you a little bit. I'm going to have to ask you to say that again. Sorry.
That's okay. Well, maybe just to clarify, how long have you been riding, Neen? Like, when did you get your license?
3 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll ask my question again. So just coming back to one of the sort of the things that you touched on there, Neen, which I would say is almost like a continuous education concept. And that's one of the appeals of motorcycling for me, which is that I feel every time I go out, I get an opportunity to practice my craft and my skill, and I acquire experience, which is going to be beneficial later in the long term. Is that your experience as well, being a relatively new rider? I mean, you've had your license for just a few years now.
Yeah, definitely. I always think that a good rider is always trying to be a better rider, and that is definitely like how I think about every time we go for a ride, and it's that it's always an opportunity to try and do something better. And there's other people that maybe put that a little bit more in a scary way, saying when getting on your bike doesn't scare you a little bit, you're kind of getting complacent, and I think there's a little bit of truth in that as well. You definitely need to always have your wits about you, always be doing your checks, and part of that will become natural over time. But I think that when you go through the, getting your test, and in the UK, it's quite a considerable and weirdly complicated way to get your big license, your full license. To ride the bigger bikes, it takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of time, and it's quite a lot of tests involved in it. And when you get past that point, I think people think, "Oh, I'm done now. I know everything," and actually, you barely know the basics. There's so much about reading the road, how much there is about knowing your bike, knowing yourself and what you're capable of, not feeling like you have to give in to sort of peer pressure if you're riding with other people, being able to anticipate, other vehicles and what they might do. Like, there is so much more that goes into being a really good rider that goes beyond just being able to sort of go at the speed limit or, ride around some basic roads or whatever. I think that
stay in position 2 at all times.
Yeah. So, yeah, I would definitely agree. Like, every time you get on your bike is an opportunity to learn how to do it better.
There's something to be said for the challenges that we do there as well. If I could just plug ourselves for a second. If you are used to riding in the day in fair weather all of the time, and then you start doing some of these challenges, that is, ride at night, or ride when it's wet, or ride somewhere different. Like, you're gonna pick things up really quite quickly, and there's probably a really good saying on this somewhere that I'm gonna destroy when I try and explain it. But if you were learning to play piano and you spent 10 years playing piano every day, but only playing the same piece over and over and over again, you'd be really good at that piece. and nothing else.
Yeah.
So you've got to get out because you've got to try something different. But obviously there is a way to do that safely.
Yeah.
For sure. Do you find in your day-to-day that you have enough opportunities to do that kind of different riding that is challenging you, but also allowing you to grow and to develop as riders?
I think that was kind of the point of of Ridemore and the challenges really was to give us that opportunity, because there isn't always, you don't always find you like going out in the rain. I don't know how many people would sit there and be like, I can't wait for it to rain because I want to go out and ride my bike.
Yeah.
But that is genuinely like something that I have done when I was, getting my license and stuff. It was, it's that possibility of like, this could happen. This could be your test. But not only could it be your test, but it is your life. Like, so you should be comfortable to do that. And, with my bike, which is a Honda CL 500 Scrambler, it doesn't have any of the sort of things that you might find on other modern bikes in terms of, like rain mode or, anything that sort of helps you out in those conditions. Like, if you want to know how to be ride in those conditions, then you have to go out and do it. There's no other way to learn. And I think that again, back to our previous point, makes you a better rider because you are used to having those conditions. But life will never give you those opportunities. Like, you have to make them. And for us, I think Ridemore kind of gives us that opportunity to do that.
I don't want you to give me any spoilers, but have you got plenty of new challenges lined up, or do you have any difficulty deciding what those new challenges are going to be?
I think it's one of the things that we talked about when we were doing this is the accessibility of what we are calling a challenge. We're actually on a challenge right now. That's the point of this weekend. We're together to film a challenge, and a lot of people would say, oh, that's not a challenge in the way that you might say, oh, going 30 minutes from your house is not an adventure, but if you find it challenging, it is a challenge, so I think, I lost my trail of thought. Mike, tag in.
Yeah, well, part of the challenge for us is time, because we have very different schedules. There's always other things to be doing, and actually doing things at the same time is a challenge in itself. So there's that. And actually, we've talked about, going to a place on your bike. To me, it was one isn't a challenge, but it has been 3 hours to get to where we're going, and then we've been doing this for a little while, and we've got more to do later on, and then we've got more to do tomorrow. Like, it is, and some of the challenge of that is going to be the fact that it's been, I think at the height it's been 32 degrees, and it is now 27.5 raining. And obviously we're recording a podcast as we go, which wasn't an original part of the challenge, but it's become part of it. Things change as you're out there, and so they do.
Yeah. And I would like, people watching the stuff that we're making and putting out there and being like, well, that's just it. I can go and do that. I can go and ride my bike at night and see some, local landmarks in ways that I've not seen them before. And I can, leave me that.
Negotiating around about that.
So yeah, I'd love people to kind of watch our stuff and see challenges as just like inspiration of things that they can do themselves. Back to Mike's point about it doesn't have to be an epic. It's like, it doesn't have to be an epic. It just needs to be a good reason to go do something that you love. And yeah, maybe you don't always need a reason to go and do that, but sometimes you're in a place in your life where you do need an excuse to carve out time to get on your bike. It's for a lot of people, if you're not a commuter, then it is just a hobby. And when you're busy or life takes over, those hobbies can tend to go out the window. so having a bit of an excuse to be like, oh, well, I've got the monthly challenge and I'll always do that, means that we just always have that space in our life to get on our bikes and do something that we love.
So tell me now, because we've been chatting for a while, and this is obviously quite a unique experience for all of us. What's it been like to ride and participate in a podcast at the same time?
It's different. Yeah, we've noticed before that anytime the mics come on, both of us kind of go, I don't know what to do now. You become very self-conscious about it. And I think there was probably been parts of that, which I'm sure you will beautifully edit out, where you've asked a question and there's just been a pause where we go, don't know. But no, it's been interesting to do more of the talk about the thing. Yeah, it's very difficult for us to have a plan. We don't have a list that we can, pre-prepared questions and things that we can talk about while we're riding. We kind of have those intentions, but in reality, I can't ride my bike and read those at the same time in any kind of safe way. So yeah, it's been good to be able to get the topics. I've quite enjoyed that, and so far I've not had any misses. So
Yeah, I think it's just really lovely to be able to talk about motorcycles whilst you're riding a motorcycle. It is such a passion for both of us and for a lot of people. So to record a podcast about doing that whilst you're doing that, I think is just, that's a great opportunity. So thank you for reaching out to us about getting us on.
It's been my pleasure, and I have to thank you for being so enthusiastic about it, and I guess everyone may be thinking, and certainly I was very concerned about health and safety to start with, but I know that you're riding in a fairly rural situation, shall we say, and low traffic. Yeah. So yes, this was a consideration. So hopefully it's gone safely. I will wrap up with a couple of final thoughts now. First of all, do you follow many motorcycling YouTube channels? And if you do, what are the kind of things that you like to watch?
So for me, I love things that capture a moment in time, really. So I actually shoot street photography over on another Instagram account because I love things that focus on certain moments. And I think street photography is a great thing that allows you to do that, these very candid, natural moments. And so when I'm on looking at things to watch, I tend to watch sort of documentaries or films that explore, different aspects of people's lives, because I feel like they can just really, those sorts of filmmakers can just get into that world and open it up in a way that, part of the charm of street photography that it does do that, but, I do enjoy finding out more about those sorts of situations. And for me, I think that with motorcycling, it is one community, but there are so many worlds within that community. And right now there's a lot of people that are, creating that culture or preserving that culture, or sadly some of that culture is actually being lost. So I quite enjoy watching a few different things. One of them is Dice TV, which is a YouTube channel made by Dice Magazine. And they do a lot of different kinds of videos, but one sort of series in it is shot by, I can't remember the top of my head now. His name is Mark Kirkland, I think, and he's a filmographer. He makes these fantastic short videos about creators in the motorcycle industry. And he does it in such a way that just really captures what it is to be a rider. And just in places that you would never normally see, or, and I find that quite surprising, all these different sorts of cultures that exist within the riding community. And another one that I actually really like as well, I'm sort of working my way through, is called Stories of Bike. And that's made by Cam Elkins out of Australia. And actually, he hasn't made anything in like a couple of years now, but he there's like 70 or so episodes on there. And I really encourage people to go and have a look, because each video just focuses on a different rider and what riding means to them and how they got into it. And it's just so fascinating for me to hear all of those different stories. And you can also see how Cam, his sort of skill as like a director and has really changed over time, and he gets better and better. And I find that quite fascinating as well, as somebody sort of hones their craft doing something that they love about something that they love. So those two for me are like probably the ones that I kind of gravitate to quite a lot.
Yeah. Mike?
Yeah. Some of the channels I think are quite random. I don't deliberately go and search for them necessarily. And sometimes when you get to the end of the thing that you're watching, it just queues up something else. So I've watched a few, like, not in a derogatory kind of way, but quite amateur videos of people just their holiday, just their bike holiday, and them with their friends going round. And there was a group of guys that was going through, or they did Scotland in the Lake District, and I'm struggling to remember where they were from now. I think possibly Sweden. And it was class. It was just nice to watch them being out, having the conversation, and making all of the same mistakes that we've made before. Nearly losing the odd drone and stuff like that. Well,
sorry, Mike.
Yeah, that's all right. Nice road you found, though.
We can have a little fun blasting on this B road.
Yeah, we could do, but where are we going?
I'm just conscious that we don't actually know where we're going at all. So we've got no sort of sat nav on, so I might sort that out. Apologies to him.
Okay. Well, I'll just talk while you do that. Yeah. Some of the videos that I deliberately watched, some of the channels I deliberately watched was Itchy Boots. I think I picked it up on Instagram, and then you're watching the clips of it, going, "This is cool. I like her. I like her attitude to things. I'm enjoying this. What else is there?" And then I wandered over to YouTube and then watched all of the things on there. There's a lot, and then she also has an academy, filming academy, where she talks about all of the techniques that she uses and all the setups and things, which I did, and I thought it was really helpful. But then because I did that, I could then see the evolution of her filming, and I mean, I don't know if you call it directing when it's yourself, but you can see how things changed over time, and that was excellent. I really enjoyed that. And then, apart from Itchy Boots, who's quite famous in this, there's Vanessa Rook, and I was looking at her thing. Well, hers are quite different, and there's quite interesting stories about Vanessa's journey from quite severe injury all the way through to motorcycling, and then doing the Africa Eco Race, and the first British female to finish that, and that journey I just like watching, because it's, how do I say this? It's not patronising. She's obviously very good at what she does now, but she's been through the same journey everyone else has. When she gives information out, it's just quite friendly. It's quite nice. You sit and listen to her talking about heated gloves and heated jackets and airbags and air vests and all of that stuff, and it's just, it seems like reliable information from someone that's not trying to ram it down your throat that they know more, when clearly she does. So enjoyed that. And then some of the other ones that I'd looked at, we toyed with an idea of an India trip at some point. So I was watching Ollie and Lavi because they did that. So I thought it'd be nice to get their version of travelling around India on motorcycles. I mean, I'm not particularly looking for the riding necessarily, but I like that that's the conduit to that journey. I mean, there are others. I mean, some of them get really geeky, like I've watched entire channels about drone footage and how to best capture that and skills you should be able to learn. Bits and pieces there, or off motorcycles completely over in the Rover with Blue Tit, the Defender 90, and that's more about the travel and the adventure and endless fixing of a Land Rover, which I think there can be similarities between that and motorcycling, and then anything to do with James May, because it's funny, not deliberately, but it's funny.
Yeah. Okay. Last question for both of you, and I'll get you to answer separately. Does the filming enhance or diminish the pleasure of these rides for you, and why?
Can I have that one?
Yeah, go on.
I
want to hear from both of you, actually. So
okay.
You go first, Mike.
So I think there's a couple of sides to this. If you're filming things, then it forces you to look around. I think it's really easy, particularly if you've been out all day and if you've been mile munching, to just get into that sort of tunnel vision and you focus on the bits you're doing and getting from A to B and forget that the journey is part of the adventure. So I like when I know I've got the camera on the front, like I've got the camera on the front while we've been doing this. I know that you need to look around because no one cares about looking at that window flex that's always wet. But the Red Lion pub that I'm going past right now looks really cool. There was some mansion we went past earlier on, and to make a point of looking at these things because the camera's on. But because the camera's on now means that I'm looking at it more, which is kind of cool. So in that respect, I think it forces you to see more, and I like that a lot. On the other side of that same coin, though, there are bits where you're like, well, this has been really cool, and how do I make this interesting? And then you start getting in your head about, oh, well, do I need to run past that bit again? And actually, that's something that we don't like doing. I can't remember where we were. We'd all bendy roads, traffic, built-up area, and then we were suddenly on a bridge next to a castle. And they're like, oh, well, that's there. Are we going to go back down that road and get that shot again? No, because we've seen it, and it would be not genuine anymore. So we made, a deliberate effort to stop and take photos and stuff, but we're not trying to recreate that discovery. Because, it wouldn't feel genuine. And I think even if the filming was really good, I think that would come across because, you wouldn't get my genuine reaction going, oh, well, that's fair. I mean, I can be much more excitable than that, but...
Yeah, I think it's avoiding that sort of performative element for the sake of the camera. Yeah, we definitely don't like that. It does mean that sometimes we just miss things, but we're okay with that because I think that's where you have to separate what you're recording for the sake of, the film that you want to make from the experience that you want to have as a rider. Like those two things can exist together and they can exist separately. But I think, I agree with what Mike's saying. Like, I do think that when the camera is on, I think in the same way as when you're shooting photography, you kind of, you understand like the difference between like what is your subject. And for me, it's kind of like once you realize that the motorbike is, it's not the subject of what you're doing, but it's the lens that you're seeing everything through. Like, I think then it becomes like this really interesting experience, because, you know, we're going past farms right now. You can experience that. I can still feel the heat. I can feel the rain. Like, all of that I can feel and experience. And the camera will pick that up to a certain extent. But seeing it back later, I think that I will have a greater sense of what that felt like, because I've got both sides of experiencing it and filming it and sort of editing it and stuff. So I think you end up with a sort of like multi-layered experience because the camera's there. Like Mike was saying the other day, like he finds it quite interesting because we'll be riding together separately, and I'll comment and make a comment about, oh, you know, this guy just pulled up really close to me, or like something's happened, and he'll hear it and imagine it, and then but later on you'll get to actually see the footage of that happening, and how that's a bit of a strange experience.
Yeah, I'd really like it when that happens, because you kind of get transported back to the moment, but you see it through a completely different lens. Quite literally, see it through a different lens. Yeah, so I think one of the examples there was the first city of the Three Cities Challenge. A guy that wants to turn in the road next to me is objecting to another person being on the road. How dare a biker be on a road? And yeah, so I heard all of that sort of happening, and you hear it in the conversation. They're saying, "Are you upsetting the local?" But I saw it later on, and I was transported back to that conversation, but from a different perspective. And it was, yeah, it's an interesting, it's a sort of semi-out of body moment.
Yeah, we said 7 billion people are experiencing today differently, and when you kind of have both sides of a conversation but filmed independently, you get to see both perspectives.
Cool. Thanks so much for being my guests for this episode, Neen and Mike, this world record attempt episode. Please tell listeners where they can find your work online.
Yep, so we are over on Instagram and YouTube at Ride More ADV. Please do drop us a message. We absolutely love chatting to people, so we would love to hear from other riders.
Great. Look, thanks again. I look forward to following the channel and watching what ideas you come up with next, what your next challenges are. Please take care and ride safe.
Thank you, Simon.
Thanks, Simon.